straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. How much time will Derek Chauvin spend behind bars for the murder of George Floyd? His defense is asking for time served, and prosecutors want 30 years. Opening statements in the Tennessee trial of a father accused of murdering his son and disposing of his body. Did Joseph Daniels beat his 5-year-old to death?
The defendant, you will see, has many faces.
And a first look into the new movie and documentary on the case of missing mom, Jennifer Dulos.
This mom of 5 is just suddenly gone.
Plus, heated courtroom arguments in the murder trial of Robert Durst, why the defense for the millionaire real estate heir are taking aim at the prosecution and judge.
I'm angry right now.
Law&Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. Derek Chauvin is hoping for some leniency when he is sentenced for the murder of George Floyd later this month. Angenette Levy is here with what the former police officer is asking. Angenette?
Yeah, Brian. Derek Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, filed this document. In it, he is asking for a lighter prison term or even probation and time served, but prosecutors want a longer prison sentence.
We, the jury, in the above entitled matter, find the defendant guilty.
With Derek Chauvin being found guilty on all counts, including second-degree murder, prosecutors filed a document asking Judge Cahill to sentence him to 30 years. That's a longer sentence than the 12 and a half years called for by state guidelines, but less than the 40 years Chauvin could get, which exceeds state guidelines. Prosecutors write, as this court has already found, defendant's conduct was not just an abuse of his position of trust and authority, but an egregious abuse of that position. They continue, his actions traumatized Mr. Floyd's family, the bystanders who watched Mr. Floyd die, and the community, and his conduct shocked the nation's conscience.
I do believe that it constitutes prosecutorial misconduct.
But Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, wants probation for his client with time served or less time than required by the sentencing guidelines. Nelson cites Chauvin having no criminal history, his service in the military and the police department. Nelson cites Chauvin being awarded 2 Medals of Valor, 2 Medals of Commendation, and various life-saving awards. But Nelson also called Chauvin the product of a broken system when asking for a lighter sentence. Nelson writes that Chauvin has the support of his family, including his ex-wife, his stepchildren, and her family, despite their divorcing earlier this year. Until now, Chauvin has exercised his right to remain silent. It's not known whether he will speak at his sentencing.
One of the things that judges take into consideration is, do you accept responsibility for your actions and do you show remorse? So it will be interesting to see whether Chauvin says anything.
Now, prosecutors are able to ask for a much longer sentence than allowed by the guidelines because Judge Cahill found that aggravating factors existed when George Floyd died, including the fact that children were present and witnessed his death. Brian?
Thanks, Angenette. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Gigi Gonzalez and Terri Austin. Gigi, as you heard, the defense is asking for probation with time served because Chauvin has no criminal record, among other things, and also that he's a product of a broken system. What did you make of those arguments by the defense?
You know, it's always a defense attorney's first priority to make sure they advocate for their clients and get them the best possible sentence based on the unique circumstances and facts of each case. Here, you have Chauvin, who is found guilty on 3 charges for the murder of George Floyd. This is a murder that was committed in front of children, in front of the entire world, that cost this city $27 million. And a defense attorney has to be reasonable when they make their requests and sentencing memorandums. And here, I'm not sure this is reasonable for all of the reasons I just stated. So I don't know if they're going to be successful in earning a probation sentence that's essentially a misdemeanor sentence for the killing of an innocent human being.
Couldn't have said it better. Now, Terri, prosecution asking for 30 years. You heard the defense asking for far less. If Chauvin does serve any jail time, he's only going to serve 2/3 of that in jail and 1/3 on parole. Are these reasonable requests by either side?
Well, obviously, I think that the request by the defense, as Gigi said, was not reasonable. But I do think the prosecution's recommendation for the 30 years was reasonable, although I think he could have gone for the 40 years because the judge did decide that these aggravating factors, 4 of them really applied, that he abused his authority, he was particularly cruel, he was working with a group, and he did this in front of children. So they could have gone for the entire maximum for the highest count. He was convicted of all 3, and 40 years is the highest. So I would have gone for that, but we'll see what happens.
Great. Angenette, as I'm reading this, some of the arguments from Nelson, specifically that he says Chauvin was unaware he was committing a crime and that these aggravating factors weren't as bad as other cases, it sounds almost like Nelson is arguing a federal civil rights case and not sentencing. Was there any confusion when you read some of these arguments in the motion?
I mean, I wasn't confused, but I think it could play into the federal case. You know, in the federal case, that, you know, violation of a civil rights under the color of law, it's a willful standard. And it's been explained to me that that means that basically they have to prove, the prosecutors, that Derek Chauvin knew what he was doing was wrong and trashed the Constitution and went ahead and did it anyway and just ignored the constitutional rights of George Floyd. So being unaware that you are committing a crime or doing something wrong and you're a product of a broken system, it sounds like they're going to put the whole police department on trial with that case.
We'll see how that plays out. I would agree with you there. Looks like they're doing just that. Let's check in on some top legal stories making headlines on the Law and Crime Network, including officers getting quite the surprise when responding to an accident in Utah. West Valley City police officers walked onto the scene of a head-on collision of a sedan with a semi-truck. When they opened the door, they realized the driver was a 9-year-old girl. The passenger, her 4-year-old sister. She's driving? The two apparently went out on a California vacation while their parents slept, but didn't make it very far. Police say the girls drove about 10 miles on a highway and freeway before exiting, hopping on a median, and crashing. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Both the girls were wearing their seatbelts. And in Florida, 2 teens are accused of breaking into a home, stealing weapons, and firing at deputies. The local sheriff says a 12-year-old boy and 14-year-old girl ran away from their foster home and found another home with AK-47s and 200 rounds of ammunition. As deputies were approaching, they say the teens opened fire. The deputies reportedly didn't fire back until the 14-year-old exited the house and continued to fire. The girl was shot in the chest and arm and is in stable condition. The two are facing charges of attempted murder of law enforcement officers and armed burglary. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, our own Dan Abrams brings you a preview of Gone Mom, the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos. But first, opening statements from the trial of a Tennessee man accused of killing his 5-year-old son. Why an alleged confession is now being contested, next. Welcome back. We're headed to Tennessee, where a father's on trial for the murder of his 5-year-old nonverbal autistic son. Joseph Clyde Daniels, who was lovingly called Baby Joe, was last seen on April 3, 2018. The next day, his father called 911 to report his son is missing. Daniels was brought in for questioning and confessed to murdering Baby Joe and disposing of his body. But he later recanted, and his attorneys now say he was coerced. Baby Joe's mother, Crystal Daniels, was also charged and will stand trial at a later date. Baby Joe's remains have never been found. Prosecutors say the 5-year-old was beaten to death because he urinated on the floor.
Claims that he wakes up at 5:30 a.m., goes into the bedroom and finds that Joe Clyde is gone. He says he searches the house, goes around outside, can't find him, and the search begins. At 6:22 a.m., so roughly 52 minutes after he notices Joe Clyde is missing from the house, he makes a 911 call. On this 911 call, which you will hear, the defendant claims that Joe Clyde escaped. He says, "My son has escaped and we cannot find him. He has autism. Last time he was seen was last night." How did he get out of the house? He was asked on the 911 call, and the defendant says he must have unlocked the door. He describes Joe Clyde as being roughly 48 inches tall and 65 pounds. He's asked how severe is his autism, and he says he has ADHD with it too, pretty significant. He can't talk, unable to communicate. He tries to bathe himself, but we have to bathe him. And you're going to hear this on the 911 call.
The defense team says Daniels gave a false confession in their opening statement and insists he's innocent.
So they do get a confession, but I submit to you that it was a false confession. And not just because the agent doubted whether he was telling the truth, not just because the agent said, "Are you making this up?" That's a great indicator that even the TBI thought he's making it up, but also because what he told them was not borne out by the evidence. You'll see that the forensic scientists went into the house. They cut up carpet to check for stains around the coffee table. They checked the coffee table. They searched the house thoroughly. They searched the vehicle, the trunk of the vehicle. And even though our client had confessed to beating this child 15 to 20 minutes, even though he said there was blood running down both sides of his face, even though all that was said, not one drop of Joe Clyde Daniels' blood was found anywhere in the house, not on the coffee table, not in the carpet.
Here with us again is criminal defense attorney Gigi Gonzalez and Terri Austin. Terri, I know it doesn't happen all that often, but if the defense can produce everything they promise in their opening statement, could this be an acquittal, or is the case just too strong against them?
I think the case is too strong against them. I doubt very seriously if there will be an acquittal. You have to have a unanimous verdict there. I think that the defense might raise some doubt in one juror's mind, which means obviously that we'll get a hung jury. But he was all over the place with his opening statement. I mean, he was trying to raise doubt, saying that someone named Daniel McCormick saw the boy wearing a T-shirt in the middle of the road. He said a woman's child's boots were missing. Another young girl saw him in muddy pajamas, and that the police failed to follow leads about this sex offender who lived in the neighborhood. So he's throwing things out there. Whether or not it sticks, I think, is another whole thing. I don't think there will be an acquittal, though.
So it sounds like the defense strategy of throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. Gigi, Joseph Daniels is charged with murder, but not the wife. Could that be because of the confession, or do you think the prosecution has something up their sleeve we haven't seen yet?
Well, if they've got something up their sleeve, they better show it. I think this confession is really what made the murder charge possible here, because as we heard in opening statements, there's no other forensic evidence that's going to support a murder charge here. And in Joseph Daniels' confession, he did not place any blame on Crystal. And I don't believe he, even mentioned her being involved or even in the room. So this confession really set up Joseph Daniels for this murder charge.
Agreed. Let's see what the prosecution can produce as they continue with their testimony. These are just the opening statements. Coming up on Law&Crime Daily, blood on a dishwasher. Will shocking testimony break the Robert Durst murder trial wide open? Plus, Gone Mom, the Jennifer Dulos story. Our interview with executive producer Dan Abrams on what we can look forward to in the upcoming. We're back. A new movie and documentary about the story of missing mom, Jennifer Dulos, is set to premiere this Saturday on Lifetime. Law&Crime founder and executive producer Dan Abrams gives us a sneak peek into this double feature.
I love Fotis. I want to have a family with him.
This morning, mother of 5, Jennifer Dulos, was reported missing.
Based on a true story.
You need to find her husband.
That shook the nation.
Whatever happened to Jennifer, he is behind it.
Annabeth Gish. Warren Christie.
People make all sorts of horrible assumptions. They don't know me. I'm innocent.
Gone Mom, the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos. Premieres June 5th, only on Lifetime.
One of the things that made this Lifetime film so effective is that there really was an effort to base it all on the true story, to base it on what really happened with Fotis Dulos and Jennifer. And so it really describes the story, but unlike in a documentary, in this story, there are actors who were able to imagine certain scenes where the two of them would have been the only ones there, and try to base it as much as possible on what really happened. So the two lead actors are Annabeth Gish and Warren Christie, playing Jennifer and Fotis Dulos. And I think that they did a really effective job of trying to channel what we know about them, using information from talking to people who knew them both, etc. I mean, Fotis Dulos had a bad temper, and you see that in the film. And Jennifer Dulos, was put in a horrible situation. She became a victim of domestic violence. And I think that you see that in the acting. You feel it in the film. And I think in a way that you probably might not be able to do in the documentary version of this, which we did as well.
Now, Dan, you mentioned that you've been following this case, and we know how meticulous you were in understanding this case. Were there any part of this movie that you sat back and saw and were like, oh, that's a good part? Can you give us a little teaser of something that really moved you in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the, it wasn't just the arguments between Fotis Dulos and Jennifer that moved me as much as it was his apologies to get her back. I think that was really telling in the film. Is she's angry. She knows she's got a problem. And then suddenly this guy turns on the charm to bring her back in. Why do I think that's so important? Because I think you see that in a lot of dysfunctional and at times violent relationships, that there are these horrible moments followed by the abuser then sort of stepping back and saying, oh, I didn't mean any of it. I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again. And seeing that dynamic, I think, was really powerful in the context of the film.
Gone Mom premieres June 5th at 8 p.m. Beyond the headlines, the Jennifer Dulos story documentary airs immediately afterwards. When we come back, all's fair in love and a murder trial. Welcome back. Attorneys in the Robert Durst case are back to fighting it out over testimony in the trial of the millionaire real estate heir accused of murdering his best friend. Prosecutors say Robert Durst shot Susan Berman in the back in December 2000. They're trying to also prove that he killed her because she was a witness to the still unsolved disappearance of Durst's first wife, Kathy, in 1982. According to the state, Durst killed Kathy in their home in South Salem, New York. No forensic evidence of that has been recovered, but a former housekeeper now says she spotted blood.
There was something on the dishwasher.
When you say something on the dishwasher?
It looked like blood.
I'm sorry?
It looked like blood.
And I want to ask you, is that something that appeared to you to be recent or fresh?
Yes. In the dining room, I didn't know there was hidden panels above a closet. And I noticed fingerprints on them. And the panels were out.
These panels, did you know previous to that they were there and what they were?
No, I didn't know they were there.
The NYPD detective in charge of the investigation into Kathy's case says Durst told him that Kathy got on a train and headed into the city. Edited recorded testimony from the now retired detective was played for the jury.
If the crime occurred in the house and there wasn't structural damage, we would never know.
Do you agree, detective, that it was a mistake on your part not to ask Bob Durst for consent to search the South Salem house?
I don't consider it a mistake. I'd call it a choice that we made in unison at the time.
You testified that you came to believe early on in your investigation that Bob Durst was responsible for the disappearance and death of his wife. Do you recall testifying to that?
I think that's fair.
After the jury was sent out, the defense objected to the prosecution's line of questioning of the detective.
Something about how it's outrageously repetitious. I don't know how many times it's gone. I'm angry right now, and I guess you can tell that by my tone of voice. But if he's asked those questions once, he's asked them at least 15 times, and I objected.
Well, it was cross-examination. It's perfectly proper. There's nothing wrong with it.
Perfectly acceptable to repeat it that often, Judge?
Yes.
There was also a stipulation regarding the testimony, which counsel signed after reviewing.
Yeah, I'm sorry you're angry. I mean, this witness is not good for the defense.
Thank you both for joining us, and thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.